Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Create a Life You Love, the podcast, where we dive deep into personal transformational stories. I'm your host, Jeremy, and in this episode, I talked to Wes. And Wes and I met in a men's group a few years ago, and we also took the Elemental Rhythm Breathwork Facilitator training program together. Now, I was really excited to bring Wes on because he does have an amazing transformational story to tell. Just like a lot of us, he was on a very specific journey. He was a firefighter and he was into real estate. He was doing really well for himself. And everything on the outside really looked amazing, but it was on the inside where he was feeling a lot of pain. And it wasn't until his father passed away that really triggered him into realizing that he had a lot of inner work to do. So, utilizing modalities like breath work and plant medicine, he was really able to kind of shift his trajectory and do the work necessary where he could get himself more aligned with his true purpose. Now he owns his own wellness center up in his property and where he helps people through breath work, through ice baths, through saunas, and different types of modalities basically to really help people on their own transformational journey. So I hope you guys get a lot out of this episode. And without further ado, sit back, relax, and here's my conversation with Wes.
I think that's what it is. I think that's what it's all about, man. We've been embracing that, like the myth of life isn't always perfect. I mean, it's never perfect. And I think you really see how perfect that imperfection is in moments like what you mentioned, camping with your family. We're seeing it with a massive adjustment of, getting out of our house and into this van and the minimizing required and the change of routine and, and all that, right? And it's difficult. Like, it's
Yeah,
not easy. Like, I mean, it's like, the kids don't like the change. And like through the kids, I get a mirror to myself as to how
yeah,
much resistance there is inside of me about the change. And like noticing that, just trying to embrace it and just taking in what's in front of us here, and I think what you mentioned in Algonquin is the same thing. It's a
exactly.
great experience to get repetition in. And I'm super excited. Like my daughter, Lana's going to be 4 next week. Our youngest is 20 months old. Like to get them
Getting out of our
doing this young, to
Yeah,
get through the repetitions of that discomfort it's very, very important to me. Like I didn't really get that. And
me
I don't know
too.
about you if you had that as a kid,
Not
but
much. No,
it's at least my experience has been it's a lot more difficult to get started later, because the trenches in the brain are much deeper.
I can relate, man. And like my parents went as far as like renting an RV, driving to Florida, and leaving me at home when I was a baby.
Mm,
They just decided to take off. I have two older brothers. They all went, but I was left at home with like the nanny or
wow.
somebody, and like some
Yeah.
because now, same as you, I'm trying to create these experiences with them. And I've been doing it since they were little. My kids are older; they're 7 and 9 now, and
Yeah.
I've been camping with them at a very young age and taking them on adventures and taking them on hikes and doing all that. So now our next step was basically getting into Algonquin, right? Doing the backcountry camping, getting into the canoe, you know, and there's so much that came up for us last year, but we grow as a family, right? And we learn to kind of support each other in different ways. So it's an
Mhm.
interesting experience, man. I'm excited for you. But why don't we use this opportunity as a bit of a segue? Because like as you're going through these opportunities, or sorry, going through these experiences, a lot of things are coming up. Like we can talk a little bit about, okay, so how are you kind of coping with it? And how are your experiences like with your day-to-day practices, breath work and other things? How are you kind of like showing up for your family now during those difficult times?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're obviously here because we know each other through breathwork facilitation. So if anyone doesn't know that's listening, I mean, you and I took facilitator training together, for elemental rhythm. What I'm finding in this moment, and I've gone through repetitions of what we're experiencing now before. Um,
why
so
don't
it's
we
interesting to have this experience again, but with different tools. So how am I showing up for my family is what I'm noticing is the tools I've acquired and the work I've put in through not only my own personal breathwork practice, but through some of the training we've taken. Um, Man, I've got so much more of an ability to regulate myself in the face of this change and the emotions that come up in me, either from being in this situation of like, living in a van and having these unknowns of like, where are we going to sleep? Where are we going to get food? Like, how's this thing going to unfold? How the kid's going to be, like like all that. But when the kids have meltdowns in this space with all this change, I'm able to keep a level head.
Oh,
I'm able
amazing.
to let them go through their process, and I'm able to support my wife as she's supporting the kids, and I'm supporting the kids, and my wife's supporting me. We've all got this common tool now. Like my kids are even practicing like breath work in a sense, not like a conscious practice of like laying down and going through like an elemental rhythm,
Right.
but like
No, I understand.
like connecting to their breath as a means to anchor in the face of a big emotion, and I'm doing that too. And that's been remarkable this time around
That's good.
because this is the first real big trip we've done with both kids. So to have our daughter Lana, who's 4, who's gone through um, a lot of practice of emotional waves, but our daughter Zora, that's 20 months, like being with them in the small space, I'm finding, and there's been moments where we've had a couple nights. It's really hot. Like, note to anyone that's listening, maybe consider getting air conditioning if you're traveling in the south, like down more south in the states, because it's hot.
You got no AC?
And we just got vents like fans in here, right? So we've had a couple sleeps, where it's been less than, let's say, optimal. Um, so that comes with more fatigue on my end. And what I've been noticing is there's been a couple moments where I've kind of lost my cool for a short period. And every time I've done that, it's when I've like lost a connection to my body. I've gotten caught up in the sensations that going. And usually the way to get back is I notice my breathing. That's been like really, really cool
That's
to see
amazing.
that. And just I think how effective it really is. Like for me, it's been a real eye opener because we haven't really done this with kids yet. But Katie and I did live in a van in 2018. And that
Okay.
was that was a time before I really had any consciousness of like nervous system regulation. I didn't really have any tools in my box as far as like conscious breathing practices. I exercised. My
Yeah.
way to blow off steam was lifting weights and like running and stuff, right? I mean, you could argue, well, I'm breathing. It just wasn't the most conscious, and I didn't have any awareness in the effect of connecting to the breath and how it could regulate the nervous system or allow me to ride out an emotional wave.
Right.
Oh my God, what a difference this time!
What a difference. Yeah.
What a difference!
It's crazy because something happened to me this week too, where it wasn't a blowout with kids or anything like that. It was just myself waking up and feeling like I was in a state where I haven't been in months, right? And it was this kind of depressed funk that I was in. And it doesn't even matter how I got there, why I was there, but it's how I kind of dealt with it. And similar to what you were saying was I was sitting in my office just like I am now, and I was going through these emotions, and I was like, okay, I can either just suppress it, push it down, continue with my day, or I can deal with it head on. And I decided to deal with it head on. I picked myself up, I changed my environment, I went into my garage. First thing I did, I started doing rounds of breath work. And I started meditating. I was like, okay, why is this showing up for me? Why am I feeling like this? And I consciously kind of like felt the emotion that was coming up. And I was like, okay, this is okay. I've been here before. How can I release it? So through the breath work and the meditation, I released it. I started working out. I started just doing the different things I needed to do to change my state. When I came out of the garage, I was like completely different. My state went from sad, depressed, in a funk, energetic and alive. And I realized in that moment that like whenever I spend like at least 10 minutes like working on myself and confronting whatever is kind of I'm dealing with, I can release it and let it go and move on. When I don't, it stays within me, right? And this probably happens to a lot of people, and it can stay within you for years, and that's when you get triggered, and that's when it comes out in other ways. So like in the situation that you're in, being able to confront it and deal with it head on, and like
Mm-hmm.
make a conversation with your wife or your kids or even with yourself, right? But dealing with it
Mm-hmm.
head on, letting it pass through, everybody wins, because then you can get back to a better state of consciousness. You're in a
Yeah,
better state, and like you're ready to roll. So it's just amazing.
yeah,
And like I know that you've been
yeah,
doing a lot of you just completed the level 2 breathwork training as well, where you had to go through a lot of that yourself, right? Where you had to do a lot of that inner work, where
yeah,
then you get to hopefully, start working with clients and whatnot. But
yeah.
I can imagine the state that you're in right now. Like you're probably done, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, I think that's been the story of the last like 4 years for me. I mentioned we lived in a van in 2018. That was
Yeah,
a catalyst shift in a lot of ways of how I was living. And I think that kind of pulled the veil down for me as to like how misaligned a lot of my goals were up to that point, personally, financially, etc. Um, at that time, though, I think with the awareness I gained from traveling in a van, I didn't have the tools. Well, when I got back in 2019, my past started with medicine work, with things like ayahuasca, and that work started revealing a lot more of my inner world. but I still didn't have the tools to integrate. And I really opened a let's say a can of worms.
Yeah.
Um, because I ended up getting quite ill in 2020, the summer of 2020. I think from the amount of things I was opening up about past experiences, both psychologically, energetically. Um, and it was funny because right at that time in the summer of 2020, that's when breathwork started coming in as a tool to navigate. And that to me was like at a time where I was experiencing very, very powerful, um, very, very powerful emotions, energies, feelings, whatever you want to call them inside. And it was quite overwhelming. And I found myself going through cycles of getting overwhelmed, shutting down, disconnecting, maybe leaning on some things that I had, I think, formed an addiction to prior, which for me were work and exercise, but in an unconscious way. And a lot of things started coming to light. And what I found with the breath work that was very, very powerful for me was I was able to do what you said, like have a tool to consciously face what was coming up inside of me. And it was incredible, like at how 10 to 15 minutes of time spent breathing, paying attention, feeling, and navigating
Yes.
really shifted the trajectory rather than suppressing and leaning on, say, like an addiction that I had, which
Yeah.
again, I mentioned for me, it was work and exercise. Exercise is great. It
Yeah.
definitely helped me cope, but when used unconsciously, I mean,
Yeah.
it can be a way to unconsciously or a way to suppress whatever's coming up.
That's an amazing point.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is a really good point. And
Yeah.
I feel like I
Yeah.
felt that bucket as well, where I was like, I would be doing ice baths or even same thing with exercise. I was
Mm-hmm.
doing certain things, but as a way
Mm-hmm.
to kind of not deal with what I really needed to focus on. And when I started to
Mm-hmm.
open up and go inward and deal with that stuff, it was like transformational. So
Yeah.
what was it like for you then? Like pre all this ayahuasca or plant medicine, pre the breath work, like what kind of trajectory were you on? What were you doing as far as like,
Yeah.
how was your life going before you started doing this work?
Yeah, on the concept of maybe exercise as an addiction, I'd connected with resistance training, weightlifting, bodybuilding when I was like 12 years old as a means to get through a lot of stuff I was going through as a child. One of the things I connected with through my work with medicine was a deep pain inside of me at not having the proper guidance to navigate what I was experiencing in life, you know? And there was a lot of pain tied to that. Well, a way to deal with that pain for me was exercise, like hard work and resistance training. And that I would say encapsulates the trajectory I was on because I started turning that into also hard work, um, trying to attain money. So I found a job that paid well in a field that I thought I was interested in. It was firefighting. I made a choice that I think focused on money rather than maybe enjoyment. So I went to a place to work that paid the most. Maybe it wasn't the most fulfilling in a sense.
It wasn't fulfilling, like being a firefighter. You didn't.
Well, just in the way I'm doing it, at the particular place I work, in a sense, it's just it just the routine. It's more of an industrial setting. Just the environment isn't the most conducive, maybe to like my personality. Doesn't mean it's bad
No,
or
no,
anything
I'm
like
not
that, right?
saying
But
that.
it's interesting with hindsight, like choosing the place that paid the most rather than the place maybe I would have enjoyed working the most. Well, and then another thing too, I think, it just fell into lack of guidance, right? If I'm being honest, I mean, it's not exactly the thing that I probably would have been doing. It's not the thing I'm going to be doing. It's not the trajectory I'm moving into now, which I'll get to. But with some guidance, I think maybe I would have cultivated a little bit more of a sense of what I actually wanted to do
Right.
versus like falling into a career that's cool. It's fun. It aligns with a lot of things I was doing, maybe not with who I am at the core. So there's a misalignment just personally, nothing to do with the job in some
Right.
ways.
It's like going through that sounds like you're able to learn about like what doesn't serve you, right? And
Yes.
sometimes that's what's kind of drives us in the right direction.
100%, and that's the story of the last few years. And whilst working on the fire department as well, I was very driven for money. And that's been a case since I've been a young kid. I've had a lot of stories given to me of like, you'll need to make a lot of money. You like nice things. Like, like you'll be happier if you get money. Like my parents didn't have very much. So there was an experience too of saying, oh, wow, I don't want to be like my parents. So I must get a lot of money to not be like them.
Okay.
So I started spending a lot of time researching and investing in real estate. So between my job on the fire department and that, there was 6-7 years of long weeks, 70, 80-hour weeks. If I wasn't working on the fire department, my wife and I were working on houses. And then I'd in between that being the gym, lifting weights. Throw in some partying on the side, copious amounts of alcohol to soothe, what was going on inside of me. That shoot up the most of my 20s, right? So to go back to where we were in the van, my dad had passed away a few years prior to that. And right around that same time, I started getting into coaching, like personal development coaching. So I started having a vector for self-inquiry at a really painful moment in my life when my dad had passed away from alcoholism, right? So an experience of seeing my father succumb to his own addiction, I think presented a mirror for me to see some of the places where I was
Yeah.
applying similar behaviors, but in a different way. I hadn't really seen the depths of it yet. And I think that's where the medicine work started coming in. I think after living in the van, taking some space, coming back to life and watching myself falling into a lot of the same patterns, there was something that was like really, really curious in me. It's like, how could that happen? How could I have so much time away from environment and fall into a lot of the same patterns immediately upon returning home? My wife was pregnant with our first daughter at that time. And I think the realization of that was like a lot that I had heard of ayahuasca as a medicine, so I had a calling to go work with that medicine prior to my daughter being born. And I think that really opened the lid on a lot of what was inside of me, a lot of the pain from childhood, a lot of the stories I was given, the lack of guidance of really connecting with who I am as an individual. It all kind of bubbled up. I didn't really have an integration practice. So it was a lot, and you got 2 young kids and your kids are older than me. So you know what it's like when you
I,
become a father.
I can relate to you, especially like when my daughter
Yeah.
was born. A lot of things were coming up for me, and this was prior to me doing any work on myself. So I was still like
Mm,
all these like past traumas and core wounds, all that kind of stuff, still
mm-hmm,
suppressed me. But when she was born and we were going through the sleepless nights, I was getting triggered a lot.
mm,
These emotions were coming out, and I had this moment as well. It's like I don't want to go down this path where all my past experiences are now going to be coming out onto her. And
yeah.
that's actually when I would have started my own journey, where I ended up going to Burning Man, and that's where my journey
Mm,
kicked off.
mm,
I recognized at the moment that I have to deal with this stuff inside of me, otherwise it's going to come out in these other ways. And my kids are going to be, they're going to be the result of all these kind of things I went through, and I didn't
yeah.
want to go through that. So I can definitely kind of relate to you saying. I love this kind of journey that you went on, because it was like, you were chasing the money straight up. Like that's what you
Mm-hmm,
so many years, and all these things were kind of coming up for you. And then when your dad passed away, it's almost like then you have to do some self-reflection on yourself, right? And it's amazing. It's amazing how somehow, ayahuasca came into the picture and you were called to go.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. It was a powerful mirror, and I want to honor you for doing that, Jared, too, for taking the time to go to Burning Man, because it's a courageous step, to like make the choice, because you actually don't have to do it. Most
I,
people don't.
I actually, I did, I was buying tickets for my friend.
Mm-hmm,
I was buying 2 tickets, and then one it was for him because he was away traveling, and I was in this transitional period where I was living in Vancouver. I lost my job. We were going to move back to Ontario, and it was like, and I had that summer, right? That was kind of in between. And I presented it to Krista, and she was like, "Yeah, I'd go for it." She took our daughter. She went back to stay with her parents, and I went. And then when I got to Burning Man, the first half of the time I was there, I was so reserved. I couldn't believe all these people wanted to like just kind of like talk to me about like whatever. They were just open. And by the end of the trip, I kind of like transformed a bit. And I was becoming more open. And again, that was kind of like moving back to Toronto. I ended up just working on myself and going into a mastermind
mm,
about self-development. And that was back in like, I think 2015. Um,
mm,
so I was like, but again, just like you were saying, it was like I knew something was off and I had to take this into my own hands. If I just kept on the same path I was on, it wasn't taking me in a good direction. And
yeah.
I'm not trying to make this all about me right now, but similar to what you went through. And that's why I love with the story that you're sharing, is because you took it in your own hands and you knew you had to do something about it. And it doesn't have to be ayahuasca or plant medicine. That's just what you were called to do. But the
Yeah.
point is you recognize it and you did something about it. So
Yeah.
you have to
Well, I
talk
think there'll be a
about
lot of that. There'll be a lot of that on this podcast, I think, Jared, because I mean that truly is, I think, the biggest catalyst for change. You
yes.
know, for fuel, for getting unstuck. That seems to be the thing that is the call to action. it can be resisted. So, I mean, yeah, I love that you shared that. Cause I mean, it's everyone's going to have their own story and how it is, but the narrative is going to be similar in a way, or like the arc of the story.
You got stuff head on. And the
Yeah. Yeah.
about doing plant medicine like ayahuasca, that is, it shows you who you become. It shows you,
Yeah.
like, once you're on it, you can't hide from it. You can resist it, but that's a
Hmm.
journey way harder. But if you
Yeah.
face stuff head on, the other side is a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but the one thing that's really cool that I've connected with is this practice of breath work that we're delivering
Right.
offers the same opportunity.
Yes.
And it's powerful,
Yeah.
and that's what I think excites me the most about this practice. But to circle back to where I was too, with my daughter arriving, even though with all the awareness I have, without the integrative tools, there's just a lot there. There's a lot of change going on. And without the tools to be with that, I simply got overwhelmed physically and mentally. And I just collapsed in the summer of 2020. Everything going on with the pandemic, being a new father, all of the things that were coming up from my past about like clear calls to action that I needed to change, and the amount of change that was being asked, it was too much.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and it was just interesting that that's when breath work found me. And specifically, like not only the practice of elemental rhythm, but also Wim Hof, who was someone I was aware of before. Back in 2017, I started hearing about him. So kind of all at once, the practices of sauna, cold plunging, breath work, Wim Hof breath work, elemental rhythm, they all started coming in, and I started practicing. Even though, and I noticed I started getting better
Yes.
because it provided like a great window for me to integrate a lot of the things that I'd become aware of through coaching. I'd become aware of through medicine work, and I was amazed. And it was cool as to the arc of 2020 came as I started healing more, and connecting more with the elemental rhythm tribe too. And that's where you and I met, on the men's
Yeah.
calls. I went to the summer retreat, the elemental rhythm men's forge in the summer of 2021 up at
Yes.
the Samadhi Center, and it was a very profound experience. And I think that's what opened the door for me to take the facilitator training. Not
Okay.
only I think being in, camaraderie with a group of guys, which with some deep father wounds was a big, big change for me. It was something I was very resistant to. I'd worked with a medicine that week too. I stayed after at Bancroft at the Samadhi Center and worked with a medicine called Iboga. Though that weekend with the guys, that week with the medicine of Iboga was a huge inflection point for me. It was where things started shifting. My body started recovering. I started integrating a lot of the things I've become aware of, and I started really connecting with the tools that I started developing through my breathwork practice. And that's, in the spring of 2020 or the fall of 21 is when you and I took the facilitator training together.
Prior to taking the training, it was kind of a huge kind of lead up that you had to go through,
Yeah.
like, your own personal transformational journey. What
Yeah.
I find so interesting, and I guess I'm big on the synchronicity of things as of late, even in my own life, and I can see it
Yeah.
in your own, how like even from a young kid, like your journey was always going in a certain direction. And yes, you had
Yeah.
traumatic experiences, but it all kind of like came almost full circle for you, because like when breathwork entered is when you needed it the most. You needed those
Yeah.
modalities to get through it. And then you needed to
Yeah.
heal yourself and then become a facilitator. So now you can pass that on to other people.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like, it is like a cliche saying of it comes to you when you need it, but it's so true that it did. Like, and it's actually remarkable to me at how true that was. One of the things that was cool through the facilitator training I connected with is to speak to what you shared about my life being on a certain trajectory. Yes, there's like two key moments I connected with specifically where breath work for me was pivotal. One was when I was like 11 years old and my grandfather had a heart attack. I remember being there with him while my mom and my nanny were essentially panicking, and kind of taking charge of the situation, getting them to call 911 and also sitting there with my grandfather. And I remember just getting him to breathe. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was just some intuitive thing to be like breathe. And I remember sitting there breathing with him, looking him in the eyes and watching color coming back to his face. His lips went from that cyanotic blue to like a little bit more pink. And then within 10 minutes, the paramedics came and they took over. But that experience stuck with me and I kind of forgot about it. And I remember, again, being in Costa Rica for my experience with ayahuasca in 2019. And my good friend Robert, him and I were day after ceremony, just kind of outside lounging in the sun. And I remember him coming up to me and he was like kind of just like shaking like a leaf. I don't know exactly what he was going through, but something personally, and he didn't have the tools either. I didn't know. I just remember giving him a hug and intuitively breathing with him, like just getting him to breathe with me. And I remember like hugging
Yeah.
him and breathing with him and feeling him tremoring. And as we were breathing, within about 2 minutes, like the tremoring just kind of like settled and stopped, and he was just breathing with me, and we kind of broke the embrace. And he was like, "Thank you." Like, whoa. And I remember standing there kind of bewildered, like, what just happened? Like,
It's
like
crazy.
in a sense, right? And it wasn't until I took my breathwork training that I realized, oh man, this whole thing of like connecting to the power of breathing, which is also something that got me through many, many difficult workouts and long runs and
Yeah.
things like that. Like I had these experiences with people where there's a very powerful experience in helping them regulate in very intense experiences, and I was like, wow, like this is it. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. So it sounds like throughout the years, like you've had this calling almost, but maybe didn't answer it right away. It maybe
Yeah.
speculating, but it sounds like it maybe even when you were younger. And this is something that I can relate to as well, is just like having this calling to just almost want to help and support people.
Yeah.
And give them, or a better way of putting it is just holding space for them. Because sometimes
Yeah.
that's a lot of just what people need is someone to
Yeah.
them. It sounds like that's kind of again come full circle for you. So now that you're kind
And
of
that's important. That's important actually. So I want to highlight that because what I feel like happened for me was what you said is very true.
yes,
But it wasn't until I had someone hold the space for me in the way that I needed it
yeah, I get
for
that.
the door to be open for me to hold space for others.
Right, because like, and again, this is from my own personal experience, but
Yeah.
like, this is a lot like I'll look at it almost like pre ayahuasca, and then there's post ayahuasca experience, and before
Hmm.
I was feeling like that's what I wanted to do, and I really did want to help and hold space for people, but then there's like the imposter syndrome, and then there's the fear of
Hmm.
it, and there's like, oh, who am I going to be doing like that type of work, right? But then we're
Hmm.
letting go of all those fears and all those anxiety around that kind of stuff, and it's like, okay, what can life look like without all the fear that comes with it? And it's like
Yeah.
you can start breathing again, and it's like it's all good, like you are just
Totally.
well doing this stuff just as anybody else is, but we got to get
Yeah.
out our own way. And that's where like the breath work, I can agree 100% comes into play, because when you're breathing, you're getting out of your head, you're getting into your body, you're relaxing your parasympathetic system or
Yeah.
nervous system, and you're just allowing yourself to have time to just process and heal and let go. And
Yeah.
it's a powerful experience. And I would just love to hear about like where you're at now that you've taken the facilitator training. You're actually a level
Hmm.
2 breathwork
Hmm.
facilitator now, and so how are you utilizing that in your life, and what kind of things are you kind of up to?
Yeah. Well, you're catching me like prime time in the transition. I,
No.
I literally just got my exam like graded and finalized from Giovanni
Yeah.
like yesterday.
So I got your certificate. Actually, I'll be sending it out to.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I got that. I'm at an interesting time right now. We're on the road. I view this as another inflection point. Like right now, where it stands is I've been facilitating like breath work for the last year and a half. With the level 1 training. Had a couple hundred people go through. I've been doing them privately for people. I've been doing them out of different yoga studios. I've also been doing it at a property we own, Port Elgin, Ontario, called Cedar Vale Wellbeing. So we've been doing sessions there with people, utilizing elemental rhythm breath work, also some other types of breath work for shorter sessions in conjunction with cold exposure and sauna. And it's been remarkable. And that started out as a bit of an experiment, and that seems to be growing. And that's opening a doorway for me to bring these gifts that I've acquired, to serve others. So my intent is to keep doing more of that. With
Sure.
level 2, I've been working with a coach. His name's Philip McKernan for like the last 7 years. I've also been doing a mentorship with him on learning from him the art of coaching, like how he coaches. So the level 2 training for me came at a great time because it kind of combined a tool that's really helped me, breath work,
Just like, sorry,
um, with,
is it life
yeah,
coaching? What type of coaching is it?
life coaching, yeah, soul coaching, soul based coaching, I guess if you want to call it that. So he's just very gifted at, I think, holding space for others and asking some very great intuitive questions. So the combination of that with other people present, the mirrors that are provided by other people and the opportunity to be challenged has been very helpful for me. And to learn from him, to also learn more from Giovanni with his level 2 training to have a very cool synthesis of soul-based coaching, breath work, and some of the subconscious reprogramming is very exciting to me. So my intent to move forward from here is to keep doing the things that we're doing on my property, but to also use this tool of level 2 training to work with people at a much deeper level, using breath work, as the doorway to access those stories, those trapped emotions, sensations that are lying dormant in the body and the subconscious mind, and really start freeing themselves from it. Like, truly, like liberating, and then creating a container for them to connect with what they know they need to do, and like, that's what was provided for me. So, I mean, really, it's just simply providing that, which I received to other people now.
Yeah, I'm so aligned with you, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I haven't
Yeah.
connected a little bit, but the alignment or synchronicity again is just blowing me away, because
Mm-hmm.
my whole intention for this podcast, Create a Life You Love, and the program that's going to coincide with it, is exactly that container for people of transformation and utilizing tools, work. And I'm going to take level 2 in September. So I can also learn how to, take people on those kind of deeper journeys and help them kind of release through breath work and through different tools and techniques and stuff like that. So it's really cool
Beautiful.
to be able to hear like how your journey has kind of evolved and stuff. And just one of the last questions I would love to ask you is, if you look at your life, like, pre all this traumatic, not pre-traumatic stuff, but I guess, how do I position this? Like working on yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like going through experiences, and now, like, you're probably still working on yourself, but now post like plant the breath work and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm just trying to get, like, love for you to share. It's like, what was life like for you then versus like how you feel about your life now?
Yeah. Wow. When I reflect on life, prior to beginning to look inward, and I think really connect with my experience, there was always a feeling of like emptiness and disconnection, a sense of being lost. That's how I would encapsulate it, and it's very interesting because those feelings were present in the face of what would appear to be someone doing quite well.
Yeah.
I was in great shape. Had an awesome job, beautiful wife, great, like great career.
Yeah,
like
everything looks good on paper, right? From the outside,
dude,
looking.
Traveled a lot, and I remember being in so many of those experiences and just feeling those feelings I mentioned: lost, empty, alone, disconnected, and had no idea why, like no idea. And as this work started presented to me, I mentioned Philip McKernan. He was someone I started working with in 2016. I remember listening to a podcast that he had maybe in the 2015 range, and it brought tears to my eyes because I think I started putting words to the feelings I was experiencing.
Yes.
And as I started moving through that, it wasn't easy, because it meant facing the stuff. It meant really looking at the misalignment that in the position I was in. The funny thing I'm seeing now is it really wasn't so much the things I was doing. It was the emotional residue inside from the pain of childhood and not getting that space held in the way that I need to, just to be with that. And that's very interesting to me. So how my life's going to look, moving forward right now, after moving through a lot of the pain of that, it's going to be different, but there's still going to be my exercise in it. Like, we're still going to invest money in things. I'm going to travel more. I'm going to be more conscious with the work I'm doing, right? But it feels different. I've identified firefighting is not a career for me. This work with people, this coaching work, is something I'm very passionate about. Breath work, helping people face what's inside. But what I'm interested by is my career firefighting serves that. Like, I'm willing to go with someone to the depth of their darkness and walk with them as they come out. And I've gotten a lot of that from my career in firefighting, so there's a physical representation of that, except we're turning it more into that metaphysical or psychological side. But I feel like these tools that I've acquired through medicine work, through my own integration, through this breath work practice, it's going to help me work with people in a different way. That's not going to look too much different than what I'm doing now, but everything's changed.
Yeah. I feel like that's a really good point. It's not a
Yeah.
matter of like transforming your life where you have to stop doing everything and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
go through information, now you're doing everything new. You can continue doing the same stuff. It's just how you show up and the intention
Yeah.
that you behind it. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I learned in my integration phase after working with plant medicine, one of the shamans like explained to me that. And he's like, it's not like you're going to go back and you're going to do everything completely different. No, it's just you're going to take all these tools and you're going to do everything with more feeling, you're going to do everything with more intention. And yeah,
Yeah.
maybe people stop doing this or that, but not everything is going to be a complete shift, nor does it have to be. It's just how you show,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, I'll use this podcast's name as a way of explaining about creating a life you love, and just be able to show
Yeah.
up and doing every day. Love how you're serving, love the people you're working with, love being with your family, community, and all that.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
To hide under this like, and again, like your example of how you kind of grew up in your young adulthood and
Yeah.
like idea of becoming successful and being a firefighter was like, it's almost like we're creating this image that we think society needs from us, or
Yes.
how we looked at, but it's not always the best for us. And
Yeah.
like last point I'll make is like the importance of going inward and healing yourself so you can
Yeah.
truly evolve. And like, man,
Yeah.
this conversation came at a perfect time for me. I really enjoyed it.
No, actually, I just want to highlight something too, just to tie in something you'd mentioned earlier, that I resonated with. You know, you mentioned your parents traveling to Florida and leaving you behind as a baby.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, like, those are the stories that we experience as humans, and that leaves residue. You know, and I vividly remember for me going back on a breathwork journey to me being like in the womb and feeling anger towards my mother
Okay.
for what was going on outside of the womb in environments, with like them being at parties and like, you know, cigarette smoke being there and alcohol being present. And they weren't irresponsible in a sense of like doing anything different than what everyone else was doing at that time. But I remember going back and feeling that, and just feeling a lack of being cared for and held and appreciated. And that's just something I want to draw light to, is these are the things that cause the misalignment. These are the things I've had to face and work through, you know, and I'm asserting you have as well, or will have to, you know, like, to really get into that alignment. And that is what needs to shift. Those are the things that need to be changed and reconciled. Maybe not so much the physical, but that's what causes the misalignment, the inability to be present, to feel the feelings of the present circumstances, right? Is like things like that. And they're deep, and we might not even remember them.
Yeah, I agree. Especially from your childhood. Like those
Yeah.
experiences
Yeah.
at such a young age. I think it's from the years like 0 to 6 or 7. The way it was
Yes.
explained to me is like those experiences can really kind of dictate, you know, the rest of your life almost, until you get to a point
Yes.
where it's like, okay, maybe it's time to take responsibility for my life and stop blaming the world for everything that's happened.
Yes.
That was another big lesson for me. I used
Mm-hmm.
to blame so many people for the experiences that I went through, especially my parents. But when I
Mm-hmm.
was able to kind of like take responsibility for it and even forgive them for some of the stuff that we,
Mm-hmm.
not just my parents, even other people as well, it's not
Yeah.
like what I learned too is forgiveness isn't necessarily about like, oh, you know, I forgive you for doing that. You're a good person. It's more forgiveness for yourself so you can move
Yeah.
on. And that
Yeah.
was like all these little lessons. It's like, and again, that's my intention by sharing these stories, you know, on the podcast, is like that hopefully someone listening to it can maybe get something out of it, where it's like maybe they have to take responsibility or make a shift in their own life. And I feel
Yeah.
like as you get older too, it's like the older you get, the harder it is to really go inward, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, there's reasons for it we learned about, you know, with the yoga term would be samskaras, or these
Yeah.
deep psychological patterns, you know, and they get more entrenched as time goes on.
Yeah.
The brain becomes less plastic. It doesn't mean it's not plastic, just less. But yeah, I mean, those are the things that truly are in our way, you know.
Right.
And for me, like, I think one of the most profound things when I'm connected with the rhythm was the Ho'oponopono meditation, to go through those heart healing mantras
Right. Yes, yes, yes.
to the parts of myself that formed in relation to traumatic events, you know. So whether it was, again, that experience I mentioned in the womb, getting made fun of on the school bus, feeling abandoned from friends, heartbreaks, like times where I like abandoned myself, whatever those moments were that I had to face. Having that space to go through that process of, thanking myself,
Yeah, that's great.
apologizing myself, forgiving myself, and then coming back to love is
Yeah.
powerful, and each one of those kind of goes through a little micro healing. And over time, that really contributes to a big shift in what's available. Yeah.
I think what you said too about just having the space to actually do that is a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. It's not like
Hmm.
it's not like we wake up and we're like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna take off for a bit and do some inner work and like I'm gonna go
Yeah.
on. Like having the actual environment, it sounds like space that you've created up at your home there. Like that's the container you've
Yeah.
created. You come in and do
Yeah.
that work. And the more
Yeah.
space you create like that, the better. And
Yeah.
I'm I see a lot of it through elemental rhythm. I work on the business side as well, and I see a lot of the different things that facilitators are doing. And the one cool thing is like this work can be done whether you go to elemental wellness, like an actual studio, whether you go
Yeah.
to yourself, or whether you do it yourself in your home, in your room, in your basement, in your
Hmm.
car. I like sometimes I'll be sitting right here and I just need a pause and I'll do the breath work or whatever just to kind of
Hmm.
regulate myself and change my
Yeah.
state. So this is a tool you can do anywhere. So like
Hmm.
the fact that you're like creating a whole like life around it, it's just inspiring, man. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think that's too one of the things to go back to a previous thing we are talking about what I'm doing. Well, I'm in a van, I'm in a park, I'm on my phone recording a podcast with you. I do have my laptop in this cabinet here. One thing that excites me the most, and I did this with level 1 and level 2, is working with people virtually. Like,
All right.
like this truly can be done anywhere, not only from a practicing standpoint, but from a facilitation standpoint. And that to me is like remarkable.
Yes. I totally
Like
agree.
very remarkable, like not only from like the fact of like, wow, this is available like truly to everyone. And there's a range of facilitators that are offering a price range too that is available to everyone. But as a facilitator, like it opens up so much possibility to like, work from anywhere, to serve the world.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
not just the local community, but also the world. And it's like, I don't know, it's just to me, it's starting to land as we kind of travel. This podcast is a part of this, like recording this. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
this is so cool. I'm
So,
literally in my van and like,
that's what
4,000 kilometers from home, and we're
that's what
doing
I
this.
point out is like the way that you're able to live your life now versus like as a firefighter, you're situated in one place, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't really allow you to move around a lot. But
Yeah.
now you have the opportunity to live like a part-time nomad
Yeah.
life, right?
Yeah.
You probably didn't have that before. So like, oh man, it's exciting just to kind of see where you're kind of headed. I feel like the big takeaway from this podcast is the importance of going inward, like you said, and doing that work and
Yeah.
not being afraid to kind of confront who you've become and and taking responsibility for your own life. And if you want to
Hmm.
make things that it's possible, you're a perfect example of it. I'm an example of it.
Yeah, you are.
Everybody else, can as well. And yeah, the opportunities are waiting for you. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, Wes. Well, amazing conversation. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm positive your story will definitely inspire some people, and I'm happy to kind of share it and put it out there. For
Absolutely.
anyone that wants to connect with you or check out your property up in
Yeah. Yeah. If anyone wants to look at us, you can go to Cedar Vale Wellbeing. Yeah, .ca. We also have an Instagram page, Cedar Vale Wellbeing on Instagram. So at Cedar Vale Wellbeing. I have a travel page in our van. It's an old one at Squat Van, SQUATVAN. People can check out there. I haven't really posted much on that. I'm not too active on social media. I don't know if that'll change. It might, but
I think you should,
yeah,
man. Yeah, I think
I
stories.
think I should too. That's an internal battle for me right now, is to like how much time to spend on it. I got
Yes.
a very addictive personality. Um, and I notice like I got young kids and I could see myself getting sucked into it. So I'm trying to make some more conscious decisions with how much time I want to spend on a platform versus in person, even though it makes a lot of sense to spread a message and, business wise, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sitting with it right now.
think you'll
Yeah.
figure it out. I think if you do it with
Yeah.
and do it for the right reasons, it can be very beneficial for
Yeah.
you. Just
Yeah.
getting like your story out there of like that path of like trying to create success around money, right? I think it's a
Yeah.
very one. I know, again, I can relate to it. I'm sure a lot of people can. And even
Hmm.
as a man, like trying to show up and this idea of what a man is and having to show up, have this job, make all this money, maybe have that
Hmm.
car and everything look amazing from the outside. I'm sure a lot of
Yeah.
men relate to that. And then your ability to kind of like say, well, maybe I need a shift. You went through a traumatic experience with your dad dying, you put in the
Hmm.
work, and now you're on a different trajectory and stuff like that. I'm sure a lot of people can benefit from hearing that story and maybe
Yeah.
also like maybe reflect on their own life and like, yeah, maybe I need to make a shift. Maybe I need to do some work, right? Maybe there's other
Yeah.
things here for me that I've been called to do, but I've been kind of avoiding them. So yeah, man, putting that story out there, I think is a
Well,
bit of a
I appreciate you for highlighting that and
yeah,
taking the time also to record this today. Cause I mean, I feel like this is a part of getting that out there. And the more reps I get doing stuff like this, I think the more, the more that'll open. So
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
thanks for doing this, Jared. It's definitely gonna have an impact, right? And
Yes.
you're an
So
inspiration to me as well for taking the time to do this. So
awesome. Thank you so
yeah,
much. All right,
yeah,
let's conclude it. I'll put the links to where you can find Wes online, to his property, where if you're out in that area, you can go do breathwork, saunas, ice baths, the whole kind of wellness regime. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this again, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
all right, Jeremy, be well.